The stars above Cadia were dying, not in the slow, unhurried way that ancient suns slip into red giant slumber, but violently, as if something beyond the veil had reached in and torn the light from them. Faint halos of pale ash hung where bright constellations once burned. It was said by the priests that these were omens, the Emperor's own warning. Others whispered of darker truths, that the galaxy itself had begun to forget the warmth of creation. And through it all, the gate trembled. To the Cadians, the gate was more than a choke point into the Eye of Terror. It was a promise, a sentence, and a grave. Generations had been born in its shadow, fought in its defense, and bled into its soil. From orbit, the planet's bastions gleamed like shards of a shattered crown, each fortress a monument to stubborn defiance. But on the surface, the air was already thick with dust from 1,000 collapsing walls. "We have stood here too long," thought Lord Castellan Marek Vane, his gloved fingers resting on the balustrade of the Casa Primaris command balcony. "Before the story begins, I must tell you something, my friends. We truly love and care for you. All the tales I spin, all the worlds I will paint before your eyes tonight, they are for you. But before we walk into this ruin together, tell me, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, take your coffee, steady your hands, and let us step into the dying light." Vane closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of decades press against him like an unseen hand. Below, the fortress courtyard swarmed with movement, ranks of Castrakin forming up for redeployment, mech servitors hauling crates of ammunition, priests daubing litanies on the walls in thick, black script. It should have been reassuring, this vision of readiness. Instead, it only deepened the hollowness in his chest. The latest fleet had limped back from the Eye in tatters, 100 ships reduced to 24. The survivors spoke of tides of warp fire, of enemy formations moving with impossible unity, of a shadow that even the demons feared. Their stories were inconsistent in detail, but united in tone. Something was coming. Vane turned from the balcony and crossed the chamber to the hololithic display table. Green projections marked defensive perimeters, rotating in slow, deliberate arcs. Here was the war in miniature. Clean lines, blinking symbols, tidy little clusters of force. But Marek had seen the truth. War was never so neat. It was the shrapnel lodged in a comrade's throat, the last cry of a regiment as they were buried under debris, the acrid stench of promethium turning the dead into ash. He was not afraid of battle. He had been forged in it. What gnawed at him now was something deeper, a question that had burrowed into him like a splinter decades ago and never worked itself free. Was it truly his duty to defend Cadia to the last man, even if doing so meant condemning the rest of the Imperium to eventual ruin? Or was there another path? He remembered the words of a man he should have executed long ago. Sometimes, to keep the fire alive, you must let the hearth burn. There were few in the Imperium who could have spoken such blasphemy and lived. Yet Vane had let him go. Perhaps that had been his first betrayal. The doors to the chamber hissed open, and Marshal Tyros strode in. His second in command, a man whose face was carved in permanent scorn. His armor bore fresh scars, his voice the rasp of one who had screamed himself hoarse in the last engagement. "They're pulling the 47th from Castra Kraf," Tyros reported without preamble. "Orders from the High Lords. Redeployment to Segmentum Solar. They claim Cadia can hold without them." Vane's jaw tightened. "Cadia can hold," he said, but there was no conviction in it. Whether the lords believe that is another matter. Tyros leaned over the display table, stabbing a finger into the holographic lines. Every regiment they strip from us now is one less hour we can hold the gate. If they mean to abandon us, they should at least have the courage to say it. They will not, Vane replied, almost gently. Cadia is the shield of the Imperium. The moment they admit it is broken, every world will know fear. For a moment, there was only the low hum of the hololithic projectors. Then Tyros straightened, eyes narrowing. You've been quiet since the fleet returned. What aren't you telling me? Vane met his gaze. In Tyros's eyes he saw loyalty, yes, but also suspicion. Seeds planted perhaps by their enemies, or by the truth. There are whispers, Vane said slowly, from those who have studied the warp long enough to hear patterns in the madness. They say the gate cannot be held, that the longer we try, the more we invite what lies beyond. Tyros scoffed. Superstition. Perhaps, Vane murmured. But he thought of the sealed chamber deep beneath Casa Primaris, where a relic older than Cadia itself lay entombed in stasis. A relic he was forbidden to use, yet one that might, if unleashed, alter the fate of the Imperium forever. Later, alone again, he descended to the lower levels of the fortress. Past the barracks, past the motor pools, past the shielded vault doors that only his genprint could open. The air grew colder, drier. The smell of stone replaced the tang of promethium. Finally, he came to the vault. The relic's containment field shimmered faintly in the gloom. It was not large, no bigger than a man's chest, but it pulsed with a light that did not belong to the material universe. Looking at it always brought him the same sensation, the soundless pressure of eternity pressing in from all sides. He had once been told what it could do. He had not believed it then, now. Now he feared it was the only true weapon left, and the price of using it was unthinkable. He reached out, fingertips almost brushing the containment field, and froze. Somewhere above, faint but urgent, the sirens began to wail. The tone was one he had not heard in all his decades on Cadia. Enemy in system. The gate had begun to open. And as he turned from the relic and began the long ascent to the surface, Marek Vane felt the first true weight of the choice before him. A choice between the soul of Cadia and the survival of the Imperium. The airlock doors boomed shut behind him, and the echoes followed him like ghosts. The war had begun. The sirens faded into the low, throbbing pulse of the fortress's readiness protocols. Deep in Casa Primaris, the walls themselves seemed to vibrate as void shields powered up and defense macros hummed to life. Outside, the sky burned red with the reflected glare of orbital defense fire. Lord Castellan Marek Vane stood at the observation gallery overlooking the primary comms chamber. Dozens of Vox officers bent over consoles, their faces ghost-pale in the glow of Auspec's readouts. Across the chamber's high-vaulted ceiling, the great banners of Cadia hung motionless in the recycled air. Green, gold, and black, each one stitched with the names of regiments that had fallen holding the gate. The first contact reports were coming in now. Not a full-scale fleet engagement yet. No, this was something more probing. Scouting elements, perhaps, testing the edges of Cadia's defenses. But in Vane's gut, the unease from the vault still lingered, a cold hand on the back of his neck. It was then that the Inquisitor arrived. The Vox officers parted instinctively as Inquisitor Daith Malrian crossed the chamber floor. The man was dressed in the understated black of the Ordo Xenos, his rosette glinting faintly under the lumen strips. He walked with the calm, unhurried step of one who knew every door would open for him or be torn from its hinges. Lord Castellan, Malrian greeted with a slight incline of the head, his voice smooth as oiled glass. I trust your defences are prepared for the long night ahead. They are as ready as Cadia has ever been, Vane replied, though the words felt heavy in his mouth. What brings the Ordo Xenos to the front line? The enemies we face now are not yours. Malryan's faint smile never touched his eyes. I am here because I believe they are exactly mine. You have seen the augur patterns from the eye? I have, Vane said cautiously, and I've heard the reports. The enemy moves in ways that defy logic, but chaos fleets are nothing new. This is not chaos, Malryan said softly. He leaned in closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. Something stirs behind the curtain of the warp. Something old. Older than the Great Rift, older than the Imperium itself. Your gate is not merely under siege, Castellan. It is being unmade. Vane felt the chill deepen. You speak in riddles. The Inquisitor's smile vanished. Then let me speak plainly. There are powers watching this war who wish Cadia to fall. Some are your enemies. Others claim to be your allies. But they all agree on one thing. The gate must open wider. And when it does, what steps through will not be stopped. Before Vane could respond, a shadow detached itself from the gallery's far side. It was Marshal Tyros, his hand already resting on the grip of his sidearm. You shouldn't be here, Inquisitor, Tyros said flatly. We have no time for ghost stories. Malryan glanced at him, amused. Ah, the loyal hound. Tell me, Marshal, if you were given an order to abandon Cadia to save Holy Terra, would you obey? Tyros's jaw tightened. That order would never come. And if it did, Malryan pressed. The silence that followed was heavier than gunmetal. Tyros didn't answer, and the Inquisitor chuckled softly. You see, Castellan, even your most steadfast men are already caught between two masters. He turned to leave, but paused at the chamber doors. There will come a moment in this war when you will have to decide who truly holds your loyalty. When that moment arrives, remember, the Emperor does not always speak through terror. The doors sealed behind him, leaving a faint scent of ozone in the air. Tyros exhaled slowly. I don't like him. You're not meant to, Vane replied. But he found his hands gripping the railing until his knuckles whitened. That night, Vane remained in the strategium long after the others had left. Alone, he reviewed every augur trace, every report from the outer defenses. Patterns began to emerge, faint, scattered, but there. The probing attacks were coordinated, timed to the rotation of the planet and the blind spots of its deep void auspex. It was as if the enemy already knew where the weaknesses lay. And then there were the whispers, not over the vox, but in the minds of the psychers stationed on the orbital platforms. They spoke of eyes in the darkness, vast and unblinking, watching from just beyond the warp tide. They claimed to feel a will, cold, patient, and utterly alien, pressing against the skin of reality itself. By the 4th hour past midnight, Vane could no longer sit idle. He summoned an encrypted channel to an old contact, a name that, if spoken aloud, could earn him a trial for heresy. The channel connected after a long, crackling delay. You should not call me, old friend, the voice said. It was rasping, like dry leaves underfoot. I need to know if it's true, Vane said. That there are forces within the Imperium willing to let Cadia fall. There was a pause. Then, not willing, Marek, determined. And they will see you as their instrument, whether you agree or not. Why? because some believe the gate is a wound that must be cut wider before it can be healed, and because what waits beyond it cannot be held back forever. The longer Cadia stands, the worse the reckoning will be when it finally falls. Vane's hand tightened around the Vox bead. You're telling me the only way to save the Imperium is to let it bleed now? I'm telling you, the voice replied, that you must decide if you serve Cadia or you serve humanity. You cannot serve both. The channel went dead. Vane sat in the dim glow of the hololithic projectors, staring at the silent battlefield in miniature. The words gnawed at him like rot in the heartwood of an ancient tree. Above him, unseen beyond the fortress walls, the first enemy ships drifted into position, their hulls etched with symbols no Imperial archive had ever catalogued, their weapons cold and waiting. And somewhere in the void, something vast turned its gaze toward Cadia. Snow fell over Casa Kraf, though it was not true snow, only the ash of burned promethium drifting down from the high cliffs where enemy shells had struck the outlying bastions. Each flake was a grey ghost, vanishing into the churned mud where boots and treads had passed. The once proud streets of the castle lay in ruin, their ferrocrete facades pocked with impact craters, their stained glass shrine windows shattered into glittering shards beneath the feet of retreating regiments. From the high command post, Lord Castellan Marek Vane watched as the last remnants of the 11th Cadian Armoured pulled back toward the inner defences. Chimera transports coughed black smoke, their hulls scarred and half-melted. Lehman Russ tanks rolled in grim silence, banners torn to ribbons. Every man and woman in those convoys had left comrades behind in the snow. It had been 3 days since the first probing attacks. Now the enemy pressed harder. Marshal Tyros approached from the strategium, his face lined with exhaustion. Supply convoys from the Moradin route are delayed again. Warp interference. The 47th never reached Casa Kraf. They've been redirected to reinforce Casa Myrak instead. That's the 3rd redirection this week, Vane said. High Command is playing stones on a sinking ship. Tyros dropped a data slate onto the desk. It's worse than that. Vox contact with our northern defense grid is intermittent. Astropathic messages aren't just delayed, some aren't arriving at all. We've lost 2 whole companies on paper because no one can confirm if they're alive or dead. Vane scanned the reports. Each missing unit was more than numbers. He could picture the faces of commanders, the way they'd looked the last time they saluted him in the parade ground. Some would already be corpses. Others would still be fighting, unaware that the Imperium had already written them off. The fortress's comms chimed, an urgent priority signal. Vane keyed it through. The flickering image of Commander Alvar filled the display. Her armor was cracked, her face streaked with blood and dirt. Behind her, the sky was the color of dying embers. "We can't hold the line much longer," she said without preamble. "The enemy it's not like any chaos force I've seen. They're coordinated, surgical. They're stripping our outer defenses like meat from a carcass." "Fall back to the secondary bastions," Vane ordered. Alvar hesitated. "That leaves 3 whole sectors exposed." "It leaves 3 sectors exposed now instead of all sectors exposed tomorrow," Vane said sharply. "Move your people, Commander. That's an order." The channel cut. Tyros shifted uneasily. "We're bleeding ground faster than we can consolidate. At this rate, Vane interrupted. "We'll be fighting for the walls of Casta Primaris within the month." He turned away, his thoughts drifting to the vault and the artifact that lay within. In his mind's eye, he could almost see it glowing in the dark. patient as a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But to use it would be to condemn Cadia entirely. That night, the fortress felt hollow. Many of the barracks were half empty, whole squads already dispatched to reinforce the next crumbling casa. Vane walked the halls alone, past shrine alcoves where candles burned low and saints' eyes watched him with expressions carved in patient suffering. In one dim-lit corridor, he heard voices, low, tense. He paused at the corner. "Telling you, the High Lords don't care if we hold or not," a soldier hissed. "We're a wall they've already written off." I heard it from the quartermaster himself. Supply orders are being cut at the source. A second voice, sharper. "Watch your tongue. That's sedition." "It's truth," the first voice insisted. "And if the Castellan knew, he knows," the second said bitterly. "He just hasn't told us." Vane stepped back into shadow and let them pass. Their words stung because they were not wrong. He did know. The next morning brought another blow, a personal one. An encrypted message arrived, sealed with the sigil of the old friend who had warned him once before. It contained only a single line. "The blade is already at your throat." He stared at it for a long time before erasing it from the system. By midday, the fortress's mess halls were filled with murmurs of mutiny. The men and women of Cadia were bred for loyalty, but even their resolve had limits. Every delay in supply, every regiment stripped from the defense line, every unanswered vox call, it all chipped away at the bedrock of discipline. Tyros confronted him in private. "If this keeps up, we won't need the enemy to breach our walls. We'll tear ourselves apart from within." Vane said nothing for a long moment. "There may come a time," he said finally, "when holding the gate will no longer be the right choice." Tyros frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there are worse things than losing a planet." "Not to a Cadian," Tyros snapped. He left without saluting. That night, Vane returned once more to the vault. The artifact's glow pulsed faintly through the containment field, as if it knew the noose was tightening. His hand hovered over the activation rune. Just one touch, and the course of this war, and perhaps the Imperium itself, would change forever. But he lowered his hand. Not yet. Above, the fortress shook under distant bombardment, and in the darkness beyond the Eye of Terror, the enemy waited. The first shots were fired in the mess hall of Casa Primaris just before dawn. No alarms, no warning, just the sharp crack of lass fire cutting through the low murmur of tired soldiers eating their ration paste. By the time Lord Castellan Marek Varna reached the scene, the air was thick with the stench of scorched protein and blood. Tables lay overturned, trays scattered, and half a dozen bodies sprawled in ugly, final stillness. Those still standing had taken sides, some with rifles lowered, others clutching them tight, faces pale with fear or hardened in rage. Marshal Tyros was already there, his voice a whip crack. Stand down, you shame your regiment." One soldier, his uniform caked with ash from the outer defenses, snarled back, "We shame nothing. We've been fed lies for weeks. The High Lords are abandoning Cadia. Why should we die for their games?" Another soldier, younger, trembling but resolute, shouted over him, "We are Cadia. We hold the gate. That's all that matters." Vane stepped forward, letting his voice cut across the chaos. "Enough." The room fell to a tense silence. Dozens of eyes fixed on him, some with respect, others with suspicion, a few with naked hatred. "Those who fired," he said, "lay down your weapons and submit to arrest." "They'll have us shot," the first soldier spat, "and you'll let them. You've been letting them bleed us dry since this began." Vane's gaze locked with his. You think I don't see what's happening? That I don't hear the orders stripping away our defenses? Then say it, the man roared. Say they've left us here to die. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the lumen strips overhead. Vane's mind raced. To tell them the truth was to risk shattering what little discipline remained. To lie was to drive the wedge deeper. He chose neither. I will not speak of the High Lord's motives, he said, voice steady, but I will tell you this. We hold this ground, not for them, but for every world beyond the gate that cannot fight for itself. If you lay down your arms now, you hand those worlds to the enemy. Murmurs rippled through the soldiers. Some lowered their weapons, others did not. Tyros stepped forward, his hand resting on his pistol. Castellan, give the order. Vane's eyes moved over the faces before him, young, old, scarred, untested. Men and women who had grown up in the shadow of the gate, who had been told since birth that their lives would end in its defense. And now, with the enemy closing in, some were beginning to doubt for the first time. He thought of the artifact in the vault, of the choice it demanded of him. No executions, Vane said. Disarm them, confine them, and get them back into the fight when they've remembered who they are. Tyrus's jaw clenched. You're letting this fester. I'm preventing it from becoming a bloodbath. Vane replied coldly. That's my duty. Hours later, the fortress was still tense. The mutineers had been separated, but whispers continued to circulate. Rumors spread faster than orders, that the Castellan was hiding the truth, that he had already decided to abandon Cadia, that the enemy's victory was inevitable. It was during this uneasy lull that an unexpected visitor arrived. High Chaplain Corvin of the Cadian 102nd. His black armor was chipped and scorched, his crozius still smeared with the gore of the front lines. You've let rot take hold in your command, Marek, Corvin said without preamble. His voice was deep, almost gravel, and carried the weight of sermons given over mass graves. I've kept my soldiers from killing each other, Vane replied. That's more than some can claim. Corvin shook his head. You think mutiny is a thing that happens overnight? It grows, Castellan. It grows in silence, in unanswered questions, in leaders who will not speak the truth aloud. Vane met his gaze. And what truth would you have me speak, Chaplain? That Cadia is doomed? That every man and woman here will die screaming when the walls fall? Corvin stepped closer, the edge of his crozius glinting in the lumen light. I would have you tell them that even if every fortress crumbles, even if the soil itself turns to ash, they are not fighting for victory. They are fighting so that the Imperium outlasts them, that their sacrifice means something. Vane exhaled slowly. Meaning doesn't stop shells, Chaplain. No, Corvin agreed. But it stops men from turning their guns on each other before the enemy arrives. That night, Vane walked the battlements. The horizon glowed faintly with the burn of distant artillery. In the cold wind, the ash of burned cities mingled with falling snow, drifting across the ramparts in pale spirals. He passed sentries who saluted out of habit, but he could feel their eyes on his back long after he passed. In the courtyard below, the mutineers sat in a makeshift pen, watched over by grim-faced Kazrakin. Some stared at the ground, others glared at the walls, as if the fortress itself had betrayed them. Vane knew this was only the beginning. The real fracture would come later, when the enemy pressed harder, when supplies ran dry, when desperation turned loyalty into a bargaining chip. And when that moment came, the choice in the vault would no longer be theoretical. The gate would hold, or it would break, on the weight of his decision. The fortress felt quieter in the days after the mutiny, not with peace, but with the taut, unnatural silence of soldiers who had learned not to speak too loudly. Orders were carried out without question, but with the hollow efficiency of a machine with worn gears. Even the air seemed colder, the wind finding its way into stone corridors, where once the heat of constant movement had kept the frost at bay. Lord Castellan Marek Vane had not slept a full night in a week. He sat alone in his strategium, the hololithic map of the Cadian gate flickering in front of him, lines of defense shifting as new enemy movements were reported. Every hour, crimson markers multiplied along the flanks. The front was bending, and if it bent much further, it would break. A soft chime at the door drew him from his thoughts. Enter. Marshal Tyros stepped inside, helmet tucked beneath his arm. His armor was scuffed, the edge of one pauldron dented from a recent engagement. He saluted, then spoke without preamble. "My lord, we've captured a courier, not ours." Vane frowned. "Whose then?" Tyros hesitated. "The enemy's, or rather, someone working for them." That was enough to bring Vane to his feet. "Where?" The marshal gestured toward the corridor. "In the lower cells. She claims she's one of ours, Lieutenant Sarah Cade, of the 72nd Casa Guard." The name was familiar. Cade had been on Vane's personal staff until 2 months prior, before being reassigned to supply oversight on the southern wall. She'd been sharp, disciplined, and loyal, or so he had believed. The walk to the cells was short but heavy. Guards straightened at the Castellan's approach, but their eyes lingered on him longer than necessary, as though they too were wondering whether this betrayal meant the heart of the fortress was already lost. Cade sat on a bench in the cold stone chamber, her wrists bound with iron clasps. Her dark hair was matted, and a thin cut traced her cheek. She looked up as he entered, eyes unreadable. "My lord," she said evenly, as if greeting him at a formal inspection. Vane stepped closer. "They say you were caught carrying enemy orders. Explain." Her lips twitched into something between a smile and a grimace. "I was carrying terms, Castellan. An offer Tyros made a sound halfway between a laugh and a curse. An offer from the traitors burning our cities." Cade's gaze shifted back to Vane. "From their commander. They'll spare Castor Primaris if we withdraw from the outer casas and leave the southern flank unguarded. They want the gate intact, and they'll let us live." "Live?" Vane's voice was low and dangerous. "As prisoners, slaves, corpses stacked neatly in a trench." "They'll spare some of us," Cade replied, her tone maddeningly calm. "The officers, the ones who cooperate. It's more than the High Lords will give us. You know it." Tyros slammed a gauntleted fist against the wall. "Enough of this treachery." "Quiet." Vane's word cut sharper than stewing steel. He looked at Cade, studying her. "You believed them?" "I believe they have no reason to lie. Not about this," she said. "They don't want the gate destroyed. They just want to pass through it. You've seen the supply reports, Castellan. We can't hold them forever. This way, Cadia still stands. Even if we lose the gate, we survive." Vane stared at her for a long moment. Survival without purpose is not survival. It's surrender. For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Frustration. Purpose doesn't feed soldiers or stop shells. I've watched men die for your speeches, Marek. I'm offering a way to keep some alive. You should take it. His hand tightened on the pommel of his sword. "You speak as though you've already chosen your side." She met his eyes without flinching. "I have." Vane nodded once to Tyros. "Take her to the upper cells. Double the guard." As Tyros moved to obey, Cade spoke again, her voice carrying in the cold chamber. "When the walls break, my lord, remember this. You had a choice to save them, and you chose to burn with the gate." The words followed him long after he left the cells. That night, Vane summoned his senior officers to the War Council. Tyros was there, as was Chaplain Corvin, along with Supply Master Helbrecht, Vox Chief Sarah, and 2 Castrican commanders. They gathered around the central hololith, watching the enemy formations press ever closer. Vane briefed them on the coming days. The outer casas were to be reinforced. Ammunition would be rationed more tightly. Civilian evacuation into the fortress would continue despite overcrowding. When he finished, Corvin spoke first. "There is something you have not said, Marek." Vane met his gaze. "Lieutenant Cade was captured today, carrying an enemy message. She has offered terms. I will not accept them." Murmurs rippled through the room. Helbrecht's voice was low but sharp. "If the terms could save the fortress—" "They won't save it," Vane cut in. "They'll hollow it out. Leave it alive in name only." Tyros crossed his arms. "We've all seen what the enemy does to those they spare. No one here would take that bargain." But Vane noticed how Helbrecht's eyes lingered on the hololith, how Sarah's jaw tightened, how one of the Castrican commanders avoided meeting his gaze. The rot was spreading, subtle but steady. Corvin leaned forward, his voice like gravel on steel. "If you mean to hold Cadia, Castellan, you must be ready to root this treachery out by the root, even if it grows close to your own heart." Vane did not answer. 2 nights later, the betrayal came. It began with an explosion in the eastern munitions depot. The fireball lit the night sky, the shockwave rattling the fortress walls. Vox channels erupted with frantic reports. Saboteurs had struck 3 storage sites simultaneously. Vane reached the battlements just in time to see shadows moving in the smoke. Figures in Cadian armor exchanging fire with loyalists. At first, he thought the enemy had infiltrated the walls. Then he saw the truth. They were his own soldiers, and at their head, rifle slung and face lit by the burning depot, was Helbrecht. The supply master met Vane's gaze across the chaos, and then turned away, leading his followers toward the southern gates. The gates that guarded the very flank Cade had urged him to abandon. Vane's blood went cold. The offer had not been a temptation. It had been a plan, one that had been in motion long before Cade's arrest. Tyros appeared at his side, armor scorched from the depot blast. "Orders?" Vane's voice was steel. "Seal the southern gates. Kill anyone who tries to pass. We end this now." The night erupted in gunfire. And in that storm of betrayal, Vane knew the truth. The enemy did not need to break the walls. Cadia was already breaking from within. The fortress shook as though the earth itself wanted to be rid of it. Stone dust rained from the vaulted ceiling, mingling with the smoke that had been creeping steadily inward since dawn. The air was thick, every breath tasting of burnt metal and blood. Lord Castellan Marek Vane stood at the heart of the strategium, the hololithic map now a patchwork of failure. The southern gates had been sealed and taken hours ago. Helbrecht's traitors had held them open long enough for the enemy to flood in, their black banners cutting through the Cadian air like open wounds. "Outer casas are gone," Tyros reported grimly. "Eastern bastions falling back to the inner line. We can't hold another night without reinforcements we don't have." Vane's hands gripped the table until his knuckles whitened. "We have no reinforcements," he said flatly. "Only what's left inside these walls." Corvin stepped forward, his chaplain's voice carrying over the distant thunder of artillery. "Then it is time. Castellan. The artifact, the room went still. No one had spoken of it aloud for weeks, as if by keeping it unspoken, they could deny the weight of its presence. Tyros shifted uneasily. You mean to use it? Corvin's gaze was unyielding. You mean to die with it locked away? Vane looked between them, feeling the pull of two different dooms. He had sworn to the High Lords that the artifact, the heart of Asheris, would never be unleashed. But the High Lords were light years away, and the screams outside the walls were here and now. He thought of Cade's words in the cell. You had a choice to save them, and you chose to burn with the gate. Perhaps she had been wrong about the method, but not about the truth. The choice was his. The vault of Asheris lay beneath the fortress, deeper than the oldest foundations. Few knew the path, and fewer still had walked it. Vane went alone, save for Corvin and Tyros. Their boots echoed against the stone as they descended, past sealed blast doors and gene-coded locks that opened only to his presence. The last barrier hissed open, and the vault revealed itself. It was a circular chamber of black stone, so perfectly cut it seemed carved by something not of human hands. In its center stood a pedestal upon which rested the heart. It was not a jewel, as the name suggested, but a sphere of obsidian-like metal, shot through with veins of shifting light that pulsed faintly, as though the object had a heartbeat of its own. The air around it felt heavy, pressing against the skin. Tyros muttered a curse. I don't like it, my lord. This thing... It's wrong. Corvin ignored him, stepping closer. This is the weapon that broke the first siege of Asheris Prime. Entire fleets unmade in seconds. Worlds scoured clean. With it, we could burn the enemy from the gate forever. Vane stared at it, his mind churning. He had read the sealed archives, how the heart did not merely destroy, but consumed, how the energy it unleashed was drawn from the life around it. Soldiers, civilians, even the stone of the fortress itself, all could be fuel for its power. Tyros spoke again, quieter now. If you use it, you'll kill our own as well. Everyone in the fortress. Maybe beyond. Maybe, Corvin said. Or maybe you'll save Cadia. The walls trembled again, but this time the sound was closer. A deep, concussive roar, followed by the grinding collapse of stone. Tyros pressed a hand to his vox bead, listening to the panicked reports. They've breached the western bastion. Enemy troops in the lower city. Commanders down. Vane closed his eyes. He could picture it without needing to see. The streets overrun, the bastions burning, the Kastrikin cut down in alleys slick with blood. Every death, another stone torn from the wall of his command. The enemy would be here within the hour. Corvin stepped closer to him. You cannot hold them with guns alone. This is your last weapon. Take it. Tyros's voice was raw. Marek, think. Once you cross this line, there's no coming back. Whatever this thing does, it's not war. It's annihilation. War is annihilation, Corvin countered. This is simply faster. The two men's voices became distant in Vane's mind. He was thinking of Cadia itself. The fortress world that had stood for millennia. The unbreakable wall against the eye. If it fell, the tide of the enemy would sweep unchallenged into the segmentum. Millions of worlds could burn. But to save it, he might have to kill the very people he swore to protect. He stepped forward, his boots ringing against the stone floor. The heart pulsed more brightly as he approached, as if sensing his presence. It was cold when his hands closed around it, impossibly cold, a cold that seeped into his bones, into his thoughts. Whispers rose in the silence. They were not Corvin's, not Tyros. They were older, layered in a language that was not entirely words. He could understand them all the same. Promises of victory, of an enemy burned to ash in an instant, of Cadia safe forever. He could also see, in flashes, the cost. Soldiers falling without wounds. Civilians collapsing in the streets. The fortress itself crumbling into dust as the heart drank its fill. He could end the siege. He could end Cadia. Marek. It was Tyros's voice, close now. No title, no formality, just his name, spoken as it had been years ago when they had fought side by side in the mud of Casa Tresh. You don't have to do this, Corvin's voice followed, sharp and urgent. If you don't, everything ends here. Vane opened his eyes. The heart's light throbbed against his palms, each pulse matching the pounding in his chest. Outside, the sounds of battle were closer still, a dying fortress calling for its last commander to decide its fate. Slowly, he lifted the heart from the pedestal. The vault seemed to breathe. They ascended toward the surface. The weight of the thing in his arms was not physical. It was heavier in the mind, each step feeling as though he carried the future of not just Cadia, but the Imperium itself. At the upper gates of the inner bastion, the defenders were falling back. Smoke obscured the far side of the plaza, but through it came the silhouettes of the enemy, black-armored, towering, relentless. Bolter fire roared. Vane stepped forward. The heart's veins of light flared brighter, spilling across the plaza in ghostly reflections. The enemy saw it. They hesitated. Even they seemed to recognize what it was. "Marek!" Tyros shouted over the din. "If you're going to do it now." Corvin's voice was a whisper beside him. For Cadia, the heart's whispers rose again, overlapping, pulling him toward a single thought. Release. Vane's hands tightened. For a moment, all he could hear was Cade's voice in the cell. You had a choice to save them. He drew a breath. And then the plaza held its breath. Smoke drifted like funeral veils between shattered statues. The enemy pressed forward in a slow, relentless advance, black-armored giants stepping over the corpses of Cadian defenders, bolt weapons coughing fire into the last barricades. Every shot, every scream was muffled beneath the pounding of Marek Vane's heart. In his hands, the heart of a Sheris pulsed with a rhythm not his own. It was almost eager. Corvin's voice was a low murmur beside him. "Now, Castellan." Tyros's voice cut sharper. "Marek, think. If you use it here, there will be nothing left to save." The two men stood on either side of him, the angel and the devil, though he no longer knew which was which. Outside, the fortress was dying. Inside, the heart's whispers promised life through destruction. The moment broke when the enemy, Shom, charged. Black armor thundered across the plaza, blades and guns ready to drown the last defenders in blood. A shell burst against the far wall, showering Vane in dust and flame. And in that instant, he chose. The heart flared, a burst of impossible light that stabbed through the smoke and into the storm-dark sky. It was not heat that poured from it, but a tide of absence, a wave of unmaking that roared outward in all directions. Vane felt it take hold of him first. The air vanished from his lungs, not because it was gone, but because the concept of breathing seemed to dissolve. Around him, Corvin and Tyros staggered, faces locked in the shock of sudden weightlessness, as though gravity itself had been redefined. Then it struck the enemy. The front rank froze mid-charge. For a fraction of a heartbeat they stood, locked in place, and then the black armor imploded, not crushed, but erased. The The bodies within went with them, vanishing into motes of light that drifted upward before winking out entirely. Stone cracked. The ground itself shuddered as the wave spread. Bastions collapsed without dust, their matter unraveling into nothing. Defenders and invaders alike were caught in the blast, their screams snuffed out before they could finish. From the walls of the fortress to the far edges of the lower city, the world dissolved in silence. The light receded almost as quickly as it had come. Vane stood in the center of a crater where the plaza had been. Around him, there was no rubble, no bodies, only smooth, glass-like ground, stretching for hundreds of meters in every direction. Corvin was gone. Tyros was gone. The barricades, the banners, the centuries-old stones of the fortress, all gone. He was alone. The heart still pulsed in his hands, but its glow was faint now, as though sated. Beneath his boots, the ground was still warm. In the distance, where the city had been, nothing moved. The smoke was gone, the sound of battle gone. Even the wind seemed to have forgotten how to blow. Vane turned in a slow circle. It was not victory he saw, only absence. The enemy was gone, yes, but so was everything else. He didn't know how long he stood there before he heard it. A voice, faint but real. Marek. It was coming from beyond the glassed plain, from the direction of the old western bastion. He began to walk, the sound of his boots sharp in the dead air. The voice came again, clearer now, though still weak. Should have let it fall. He found her lying on the edge of the annihilation zone. Cade. Her armor was scorched, her helmet gone, her eyes burning with a kind of fury he had only seen in the moments before a duel. You, she coughed, killed them all. Vane crouched beside her. I saved Cadia. You saved nothing, she spat. A dead world can't stand watch. He looked out across the smooth, barren plain. In his mind, the whispers of the heart still coiled like smoke. This is what saving looks like. Cade's breath was ragged. You think they won't come again? You think you can keep doing this? Every time they come, you'll burn more of it, until there's nothing left but you. She was wrong, he told himself. The heart was not a habit. It was a weapon of last resort. And it had worked. The enemy was gone, but the wind that finally rose was cold and dry, and it carried no sound of life from the city. By nightfall, the skies over Cadia were empty. No enemy ships. No friendly ones either. The orbital fleet had been consumed in the same blast that had erased the city. Vane sat on the edge of the plain, the heart resting beside him. It no longer whispered, or perhaps he no longer heard. In the dark, it was only a dull ember, waiting. Footsteps approached. He turned, half expecting to see another survivor, but it was a figure in armor he did not recognize. Pale steel marked with symbols older than the Imperium itself. The stranger carried no weapon, but there was no mistaking the weight of his presence. You opened it, the man said. His voice was deep, patient. Few survived that. Vane's throat was dry. Who are you? Not your enemy, the man replied. Not yet. He crouched, studying the heart with a detached fascination. You know what it is now, what it costs, and you will use it again. I won't. You will. The man straightened. Because you have already decided that the price is worth paying. That is how all empires end. Before Vane could answer, the stranger was gone, not walking away, not vanishing in light, but simply absent, as if he had never been there. Dawn came pale and silent. Vane rose and began walking toward the horizon. He did not know where he was going. There was no fortress left to return to, no command to give. The heart was still in his hand. Far above, the first pinpricks of light marked the reappearance of ships in high orbit. He could not tell if they were friend or foe. It didn't matter, because now he knew the battle for Cadia was over, and the war for what remained of the galaxy had just begun. 3 weeks after the fall of Cadia, the galaxy had already begun to rewrite the truth. The official communiques from the Segmentum Obscurus claimed the fortress world had been strategically evacuated and sterilized to prevent enemy occupation. No mention was made of the heart of Asheris. No mention of the fact that most of the defenders had not been evacuated at all. In the space between those lies, rumors bred like vermin. Some claimed Cadia had been swallowed by a warp storm. Others whispered of a Castellan who had unleashed a god's weapon upon his own people. The Imperium's regimental command was careful never to speak Vane's name in public, not because they wanted to protect him, but because they feared what would happen if the us story reached the wrong ears. On the world of Bellis Corona, the War Council of the Segmentum gathered in the high chamber of the Arcadial Spire. Lord Admiral Rathven slammed his gauntleted fist on the war table. We are bleeding sectors while we debate ghosts. The Black Host was broken at Cadia. This is our chance to drive them back. Inquisitor Elira Vale did not flinch at the Admiral's fury. Her black eyes were cold, her voice even. The Black Host was not broken. It simply withdrew. It will return, and when it does, we will no longer have Cadia to hold them. The fortress was lost, Rathven spat. It was erased, Vale corrected, by a weapon no one should have, and yet someone clearly does. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. No one wanted to say it. Far from the glittering halls of Bellis Corona, Marek Vane kept to the shadowed trade routes between abandoned mining worlds and uncharted moons. He no longer wore his Castellan's armor. The sigils of Cadia would have been a death sentence on any Imperial dock. Instead, he travelled in a scavenged frigate, nameless, slow, and invisible to most augurs. The heart of Asheris lay locked in a stasis vault in the ship's hold. He had tried, more than once, to throw it into a star. Each time, his hands had refused. It did not speak to him now, but he could feel its presence in his sleep, like the memory of a noise too loud to forget. The galaxy did not pause to mourn. On the forge, world Veyrak III, Adeptus Mechanicus Magi whispered of signals detected on the edge of the ghoul stars, patterns in the void that matched the heart's annihilation wave. They debated whether this was proof of other relics, or of the same one being used again. In the Hrax subsector, a rebel warlord claimed to possess the power that killed Cadia. He demanded the surrender of 3 neighboring systems. His ships were found drifting, hulls hollowed out as if their mass had simply leaked away. The whispers spread faster than the truth ever could. The weapon is awake. The Castellan lives, and the heart will be used again. On Carthagos Station, a meeting took place in a candlelit chapel, warded against Vox recording. "You're certain it's him?" the cloaked woman asked. The man opposite her, an astropath whose eyes had been replaced with polished augmetic lenses, nodded slowly. The mind print is the same, ragged at the edges, but it is Vane. He's heading spinward, alone. "Alone for now," the woman murmured. "That will change the moment someone decides they can control him." She reached for the table's data slate and flicked through a list of names. Rogue traders, mercenary captains, planetary governors with more ambition than loyalty. He'll be hunted by every power in the sector before the month ends. Some will want him dead. Others... She smiled faintly. Others will offer him a throne. Vane did not seek a throne. He sought answers. In the dust vaults of an abandoned librarium on Tessaran IV, he pried open stasis crates older than the Imperium itself. He found scrolls written in languages that hurt his eyes to read, diagrams of stellar maps that matched no modern charts. One fragment in particular chilled him, an etched plate showing 7 objects like the heart, each held by a figure whose features were deliberately blurred. Beneath it, in jagged script, a phrase he could almost translate. When the 7 sing, the walls will fall. He remembered the stranger who had confronted him on Cadia, the pale steel armor, the certainty in his voice. You will use it again. Perhaps it had not been a warning. Perhaps it had been a statement of design. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Segmentum Obscurus, the Black Host stirred. Their warlord, a giant clad in Baroque armor etched with the names of 1,000 dead worlds, listened as his lieutenant spoke of Cadia's fate. They think the weapon theirs alone, one sneered. The warlord's voice was low, amused. It was never theirs. It was a shard of the first gate, and we know where the next lies. He turned his gaze to the void. Let the Imperium chase its ghost Castellan. By the time they find him, we will have opened another door. And the first shots of the survivors' war were not fired on a battlefield. They were whispered in back rooms, etched into secret orders, carried by couriers whose ships never arrived. On the agri-world of Orantis, an imperial governor pledged fealty to a nameless benefactor, promising his planet's resources in exchange for protection. Within days, Orantis vanished from astropathic contact. On the pirate haven of Ravine's Moor, a bounty was placed. Marek Vane, alive, 500,000 thrones. Dead, 50,000. The price alone told anyone paying attention which outcome was preferred. And in the high cathedrals of terror itself, where the light of the Astronomicon burned brightest, an inquisitorial conclave passed a single chilling directive: secure the heart at any cost. Vane felt the noose tightening long before he saw his hunters. First came the mercenary ships, their holds full of desperate crews hoping for the bounty. Then came the rogue traders, all smiles and empty offers of alliance. Finally, as he fled across the ghost belt of Cryos Theta, the hunters who did not speak, who did not transmit warnings or threats, only closed in, silent and relentless. He fought when he had to, he ran when he could, and each time the heart remained locked in its vault, untouched. But with every battle, every narrow escape, the thought grew heavier. One pulse, and they would all be gone. It would be so easy. In the end, the decision was stolen from him. On the fringe world of Derek's Fall, a kill team finally cornered him in the ruins of a manufactorum. They wore no heraldry, but their weapons were mechanicus forged, and their tactics were precise enough to suggest inquisitorial training. Pinned beneath the shadow of a half-collapsed tower, Vane heard the vault in his ship's hold being breached. The sound reached him not through his ears, but through his bones, the heart waking. He fought his way free, but by the time he reached the docks, the vault was empty. The hunters were gone, and so was the heart of Asheris. Somewhere across the Gulf of Stars, another war was about to ignite. The Castellan who had erased Cadia now stood without the only weapon that had made him feared, and for the first time since the heart had entered his hands, Marek Vane felt something new, relief. But it was short-lived, because even as his ship broke orbit, Astropathic channels across 3 sectors screamed the same single word: activation. The heart had been used again. Darkness clung to the void, between stars like a suffocating shroud. The cold hull of Vane's ship trembled beneath the slow pulse of the warp engines, each beat echoing the torment in his mind. He sat alone in the command chair, staring at the flickering hologram of the sector map. Somewhere out there, hidden, guarded, maybe even worshipped, lay the heart of Asheris, the weapon that had ended Cadia, the weapon that had become a curse. News of the Vault's breach had spread like wildfire. Every major power with eyes in the void had launched its own hunters. Inquisitorial death squads operating in the shadows of hab blocks, rogue traders wielding fleets like clubs, mercenary companies stalking trade routes with bloodied contracts, and worse, the Black Host stirring beneath the veil of broken stars, hungry for the weapon that could tear open the gates to their hellish legions. None of them knew the price of the heart. None of them understood the curse it carried. But Vane did. His mind drifted to the stranger he had seen on Cadia, the pale steel armor, the calm certainty. The words still echoed in his thoughts. You will use it again, because you have already decided the price is worth paying. Had Vane truly made that choice? Or was the heart shaping him from the moment it came into his grasp, bending his will to its ancient hunger? He rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of sleepless nights. The faces of the dead haunted him. Defenders trapped in the wave of annihilation. The civilians lost in the streets. The comrades who had trusted him. Each one was a debt he had not yet repaid. The ship's comm chirped sharply. Vane snapped out of his thoughts. Unidentified contact, bearing Imperial markings. He tapped the console. The view screen flared to life, revealing a sleek escort frigate. The black and gold livery of the Eternal Concordance, a secretive order within the Adeptus Mechanicus. The comm crackled again. Castellan Vane, this is Magos Dominus Hethron of the Eternal Concordance. We have urgent business regarding the heart of Asheris. Prepare to be boarded. Vane clenched his jaw. The Mechanicus were as relentless as the Inquisition, but they sought knowledge, sometimes even salvation, through any means necessary. He keyed the intercom. I am not interested in parley. Turn back or be fired upon. The response was calm, almost clinical. We will not leave without the artifact. Stand down. The boarding was swift. Magos Dominus Hethron and a cadre of tech priests materialized aboard his bridge through a sudden teleport. Their bodies were augmented with machinery that hissed and clicked. Their eyes glowed with synthetic light. Vane drew his relic blade, the ancient weapon a reminder of battles long past. Leave the ship, he commanded, or I will make you regret it. Hethron's gaze was unflinching. You carry a burden too great, Castellan. The heart consumes all who possess it. Surrender it to us. We will ensure it is studied, contained, or destroyed. Vane's laugh was bitter. You think I would trust the Mechanicus with this? Suddenly, alarms screamed as the ship shook violently. The boarding party snapped to attention, but Vane's sensors detected the true cause. A massive energy signature, far larger than their vessel, was charging weapons just outside the system. The Black Host had arrived. Without hesitation, Vane ordered full power to the engines. The Eternal Hunter was now the hunted. The black void outside the viewport blossomed with the unnatural glow of a warship built for destruction, its prow adorned with the carved skulls of 1,000 dead worlds. Hethron barked orders to his tech priests as the Eternal Concordance engaged their arcane weapons. Vane maneuvered his ship through a narrow asteroid field, hoping to use the debris to mask his escape. As the battle raged, Vane's mind raced. He could not allow the heart to fall into the hands of the Black Host. Its power would open the gates for legions of warp demons, dooming trillions. But could he trust the Imperium's own agents? The Mechanicus or the Inquisition? They each held secrets darker than the Xenos they hunted. His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp jolt as his ship took a direct hit. Systems flickered and died. Hethron's voice cut through the chaos. The artifact must be transferred. You cannot hold it any longer. Vane hesitated, but the truth was undeniable. The heart was more than a weapon. It was a poison spreading through his very soul. Reluctantly, he triggered the stasis vault's release sequence. A cargo pod ejected, hurtling away from the battle in a blistering flash of plasma. Vane watched it disappear into the void, hope and dread wrestling within him. If the pod survived, the heart would live. If it was lost or captured, the heart's consequences would ripple across the stars. The battle continued around him, but for Vane, the war had narrowed to a single point of light, drifting away into the black. Hours later, alone on the bridge, Vane allowed himself a moment of weakness. He removed his helmet, running a hand through his greying hair. "Why?" he whispered to the void. "Why must this curse never end?" The silence answered. Outside, the warship of the Black Host loomed like a god of death, its terrible guns primed for another volley. And somewhere, beyond reach and sight, the heart of Asheris drifted onward, a pulse in the darkness, waiting for the next hand to claim it, the next soul to bear its terrible weight. The void was a tapestry of cold stars and forgotten secrets. Marek Vane's ship, a battered relic of lost wars, slipped like a ghost through the less charted lanes of the Solaris expanse. His eyes, rimmed with fatigue and haunted by the weight of past decisions, never left the dim hollow screen where flickering blips marked distant vessels, hunters, scavengers, worse. Somewhere, beyond the veil of sensor noise and shadowed nebulae, the heart of Asheris drifted still. The solar winds whispered through the station at Solace Prime, a forgotten outpost on the edge of Imperial space. Here, beneath the cracked dome of the abandoned sector hub, a new player prepared to enter the game. Her name was Serafina Voss, a rogue trader of infamous repute. She moved through the underworld with the grace of a predator and the cunning of a seasoned predator. The hololith before her cast a pale glow on her sharp features as she examined a data slate encrypted with the latest intelligence, a stolen astropathic transmission hinting at the heart's recent activation. "You're telling me the Castellan lost the heart," she murmured, lips curling into a sly smile. Her second in command, a wiry man named Calix, glanced at her warily. "That means it's unclaimed, up for grabs by anyone with the means to seize it." Serafina's eyes gleamed. "And that means opportunity. A weapon like that could buy empires or destroy them. We need to move fast." Meanwhile, Marek Vane's thoughts churned like the roiling nebulae outside his viewport. He had lost the heart, not to the Black Host, nor to the Mechanicus, but to unknown hands. The bitter sting of failure gnawed at him. His own reluctance, his hesitation, had cost Cadia's salvation more than once. But retreat was not an option. His comm crackled suddenly, a voice distorted but urgent. "Castellan Vane," the voice rasped. "This is Inquisitor Malric of the Ordo Malleus. We have tracked the heart to the Aegis cluster. We will assist you in retrieving it. Your cooperation is expected." Vayne narrowed his eyes. Allies were scarce, and trust even scarcer. The Aegis cluster was a storm of chaos and war. Pirate enclaves, rogue, psychers, and traitorous remnant factions, all vying for power amid shattered asteroid fields and dead moons. As Vayne's ship approached, the sensors flared, detection signatures everywhere. A trap awaited. Suddenly, volleys of plasma scorched the void. Raiders emerged from nebulae like shadows made flesh, swarming Vayne's vessel with deadly precision. Vayne barely avoided the first assault, ordering evasive maneuvers with desperate urgency. The bridge shuddered under impacts, consoles sparking and flickering. "This is no ordinary hunt," Vayne muttered. "They know the value of the prize." In the depths of the cluster, Seraphina Voss played her own hand. She had made contact with the mercenary warlord, known only as Karos, the Iron Maw, a brutal commander whose fleets had terrorized systems from the fringe to the inner sectors. Their alliance was uneasy, built on mutual benefit and the scent of gold and power. "We strike at the same target," Karos growled during a tense meeting aboard his flagship, "but only one of us will claim the heart." Seraphina's smile was cold and unyielding. "Then let the stars decide." Vayne's ship, battered but alive, managed to break through the initial assault and dive deeper into the cluster. His scanners picked up a faint energy signature, ancient, raw, and unmistakable. The heart was close. With a grim determination, Vayne ordered a course toward a derelict space station, the supposed resting place of the heart's escape pod. As Vayne docked with the station's corroded bay, silence greeted him. The airlock hissed open to reveal corridors choked with darkness and dust. Shadows danced along broken walls, and every step echoed with a hollow weight. He moved cautiously, hand on his blade, senses alert to every sound. At the heart of the station, he found it. The pod, cracked and dormant, but unmistakably the vessel that held the heart. But it was not alone. A figure stepped from the shadows. A woman clad in black and crimson, her eyes sharp, her presence commanding. "Looking for this?" she asked, holding the heart in her gloved hands. Vayne's breath caught. The woman was Seraphina Voss. "I've been waiting for you, Castellan," she said, her voice both mocking and measured. "The heart belongs to whoever has the will to wield it." Vayne stepped forward, pain and resolve twisting in his gaze. That weapon destroyed Cadia. It must never be used again. Seraphina laughed softly. "It destroyed Cadia because of those who feared its power. I intend to wield it to shape the galaxy on my terms." Between them, the heart pulsed, a living relic of destruction and salvation, its light flickering like a heartbeat in the stillness. Outside, the station's sensors flared to life. The Black Host's warships loomed on the horizon, their engines singing death. The battle for the heart was no longer just between two seekers. It was the harbinger of a war that would ripple through the stars. The air within the derelict station was thick with tension, as if the very walls remembered the countless betrayals that had unfolded beneath their shadowed arches. Marek Vayne and Seraphina Voss faced each other, the heart of Asheris pulsing faintly between them. A silent judge, a whispered promise, a looming doom. "You don't understand what this thing is," Vayne said, his voice low, worn from sleepless nights and battles fought in the mind as much as the void. "It's not just a weapon, it's a burden. Every use fractures reality. Every activation shreds the soul of its wielder." Seraphina's eyes glimmered with steel. "And every empire needs a sword to carve its destiny. The galaxy belongs to those bold enough to grasp power." Vayne shook his head. Cadia was the last time. That was the cost. If you use it again, you condemn everything. Before either could speak further, the station's sensors flared violently. The Black Host had arrived, their fleet encircling the station like vultures around a dying beast. From the viewport, the sky burned with crimson fire as Baroque warships unleashed torrents of plasma and lance fire. Vane's hand tightened on his relic blade, the metal singing in response. Seraphina's smile faded, replaced by a grim resolve. This ends here, with us or with them. A sudden explosion rocked the station. Power flickered. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in angry red. The two forced an uneasy alliance, navigating the twisting labyrinth toward the pod. The station groaned and shuddered beneath the assault, the heart of their fragile truce. They moved fast, shadowed by the echo of distant footsteps and whispered threats. At the core, they reached the vault housing the heart. Vane's fingers trembled as he reached out, the weapon cold and alive in his grasp once more. But then Seraphina spoke softly. "There's a price you haven't seen." She produced a hololith, its screen flickering with arcane symbols and ancient star charts, a map of hidden gateways linked to the heart's power. "They're not just weapons," she said, voice low. "They're keys, and using one awakens the others." Vane's mind reeled. The 7 shards, the ancient prophecy. A brutal roar echoed through the station as enemy boarding parties breached their position. Steel clashed, and the air filled with the scent of ozone and burning ceramite. Vane and Seraphina fought side by side, blade and gun, instinct and precision. In the midst of battle, trust was forged in fire, but doubt lingered like a shadow in every glance. After the last attacker fell, the station trembled violently, a chain reaction triggered by the destabilizing power of the heart. The station was breaking apart. "We have to leave," Seraphina shouted. Vane secured the heart, his thoughts a storm of regret and determination. As they sprinted through collapsing corridors and blinding flashes, Vane realized the choice ahead was no longer between possession or sacrifice, but between survival and damnation. They made it to the escape pods just as the station began to implode, fragments exploding into the void like dying stars. Vane and Seraphina entered pods side by side, hearts pounding with the weight of what they carried. As the pods ejected into the darkness, the last sight was the station's destruction, a symbol of ambition and ruin intertwined. In the silent void, Vane whispered, "This war is far from over." Seraphina nodded. The heart chooses its masters and its victims. Between them, the heart pulsed, a fragile beacon amid the encroaching night. The escape pods drifted apart into the cold silence of the void, each carrying a fate bound to the pulsing heart of Asheres. Marek Vane's pod shuddered as it slowed, sensors flickering under the strain of damage sustained during the station's collapse. He lay back against the cold hull, his breath ragged. Beside him, the weight of failure pressed heavier than any physical wound. The heart was still his to bear, but the tenuous alliance with Seraphina Voss had fractured under fire, their shared victory as fragile as the debris left behind. Vane's mind traced back to the countless faces burned into his memory. The soldiers lost on Cadia, the innocents sacrificed to an empire's pride, the comrades whose trust had been shattered by the creeping shadow of the heart's influence. He knew the cost of ambition now, the price not just paid in blood, but in shattered loyalty and bitter regret. Meanwhile, Seraphina's pod spun silently toward the star system of Zephyrus. a lawless sector where mercenaries and exiles carved out fragile dominions beneath the gaze of forgotten gods. Within the cramped confines of her pod, Seraphina stared at the heart, now hers, if only briefly. Her fingers traced the ancient sigils glowing faintly beneath its surface, each pulse a reminder of power and peril intertwined. Her ambition burned brighter than the cold stars outside. Power does not wait for the worthy, she thought. It demands the strong. The sprawling mercenary enclave of Zephyrus Station welcomed Seraphina with open arms, or rather, open contracts. Word of the heart's recovery spread quickly, attracting predators and opportunists alike. Her arrival was marked by whispered deals in smoke-filled taverns, tense negotiations in shadowed corridors, and the sharpening of blades under flickering light. Yet Seraphina knew the true challenge was not surviving the hunters, but controlling the weapon that had toppled worlds and fractured realities. Far from Zephyrus, Vane's pod was intercepted by a squadron of Imperial void fighters, their sleek silhouettes cutting through the darkness like blades of judgment. An inquisitorial officer, clad in dark armor, etched with the symbols of the Ordo Malleus, boarded his pod with measured steps. "Castellan Vane," she intoned, her voice cold but respectful. "Your possession of the heart complicates the Imperium's plans. We require your cooperation." Vane met her gaze, wary yet resigned. Plans forged on the bones of innocence are no plans at all. Her eyes hardened. The galaxy needs order. The heart is a threat to that order. Back on Zephyrus, Seraphina convened her war council, a motley assembly of mercenary captains, rogue psychers, and disillusioned nobles. Her vision was clear: to wield the heart not as a weapon of destruction, but as a tool to reshape the fractured galactic balance. But the heart demands sacrifice, a grizzled captain warned. Every use leaves a scar on the wielder and the world. Seraphina's smile was unwavering. Sacrifice is the price of change. As Vane and Seraphina navigated the treacherous politics of war and power, unseen forces stirred. The Black Host, shattered but not defeated, moved in the shadows, seeking the opportunity to reclaim the heart and open the gates to eternal chaos. And within the darkest reaches of the warp, ancient entities whispered promises of power, binding fate and ambition in a deadly dance. Vane wrestled with his conscience. Could the weapon he had borne in desperation ever become a force for salvation? Or was it doomed to be a beacon of ruin, no matter whose hands held it? Seraphina, meanwhile, embraced the seductive call of power, willing to walk the razor's edge between control and destruction. Their paths, intertwined by the heart's terrible legacy, were hurtling toward a reckoning, where loyalty would be tested and the true cost of ambition revealed. The stars outside seemed to pulse in rhythm with the heart, a cosmic heartbeat that echoed across the void, heralding the coming storm. The embers of betrayal smoldered quietly, waiting for the spark that would ignite the final war. The cold vacuum beyond Zephyrus Station was an unforgiving void, yet inside its battered walls, the weight of impending doom pressed heavier than the crushing black. Mrek Vane paced the dim command chamber, the hum of failing power conduits the only sound beyond his measured footsteps. The heart of Asheris, locked once more in its stasis vault, lay silent but ominous, a dark promise etched into the fate of all who dared claim it. Seraphina Voss had disappeared into the maze of politics and shadows that governed Zephyrus, her ambitions cloaked behind smiles sharp as blades. Vane knew better than to trust her alliances. Trust was a currency more volatile than plasma. A signal burst suddenly, interrupted the tenuous calm. Vane's comm crackled to life with the harsh voice of Inquisitor Malric. Castellan, the Black Host's fleets converge on Zephyris. They seek the heart. You must prepare. The war was no longer distant. It was here. With grim determination, Vane rallied what loyal forces remained. A ragtag coalition of Imperial remnants, disgraced guardsmen, and desperate mercenaries willing to fight not for glory, but for survival. Seraphina, in her private chambers, contemplated the pieces on her cosmic chessboard. Karos, the mercenary warlord, had grown impatient. His hunger for the heart's power was insatiable, and his fleets shadowed every route. An envoy arrived with a stark choice: betray Vane and seize the heart for Karos, or risk obliteration under the Black Host's wrath. Her lips curved into a predatory smile. "I will make my own terms," she whispered. "No one will dictate my fate." The first battle erupted in the asteroid fields orbiting Zephyris. Vane's forces, though outnumbered and poorly equipped, fought with desperation, born from knowing the stakes were cosmic in scale. Plasma lances cut through the void, and hulls erupted in firestorms that scattered debris like fallen stars. But amidst the chaos, Vane's heart burned with an unspoken question. Could the heart's terrible power ever be wielded without becoming the wielder's doom? In the shadows of Zephyris Station, betrayal festered. Seraphina met Karos beneath flickering lights, their whispered parley laced with venom and ambition. "We take the heart tonight," Karos hissed. "Together, we will be unstoppable." Seraphina's gaze was steel. "Together, yes, but only as long as I hold the key." The warlord's eyes narrowed. "Then the key will be taken." As the night deepened, the alliance shattered. Mercenaries loyal to Karos swarmed the station, igniting firefights that tore through the corridors like wildfire. Vane, alerted by frantic Vox messages, fought his way toward the vault, but the betrayal was already in motion. A close confidant, once a trusted lieutenant, revealed himself as Karos's agent. In the vault's cold chamber, Vane confronted the traitor in a clash of blades and broken vows. "You don't understand what you risk," Vane warned, desperation bleeding into his voice. The traitor's laugh was hollow. "Power is worth any price. You've lost already." The vault erupted in a surge of energy as the heart awoke once more, its pulse shaking the very fabric of reality. The battle for the heart had become more than war. It was a battle for the soul of the galaxy. In the chaos, Seraphina appeared, her eyes wild with the hunger for control. "I warned you," she said, voice edged with fury. "No one commands the heart." The station trembled violently as the heart's power unleashed a wave of destruction, tearing corridors apart and throwing combatants into the void. Vane, Seraphina, and the traitor were caught in the storm, their fates intertwined with the violent pulse of the ancient weapon. When the dust settled, the heart lay dormant once more, but the price was clear. The vault was shattered, alliances broken, and the warlords of the galaxy would never be the same. Vane, bloodied and weary, looked to the stars beyond the broken windows. The war was far from over, but the true battle had begun. The choice between salvation and damnation loomed on the horizon. The cold stars outside Zephyris Station bore silent witness to the final reckoning. Inside, the remnants of Marek Vane's forces huddled amid shattered consoles and smouldering corridors, the air thick with smoke and unspoken fear. The heart of Asheris, The terrible prize that had shaped destinies lay vulnerable, its pulse a faint heartbeat beneath layers of fractured ceramite. Vane's eyes, shadowed by exhaustion and haunted by memories of loss, scanned the room where allies and foes alike now faced a fragile truce. Serafina Voss appeared at the threshold, her presence a storm of ambition and fragile hope. "We cannot wait," she said, voice steady, yet edged with urgency. "The Black Host will be upon us before dawn. We must make a choice. Use the heart or die." Vane met her gaze, the weight of the galaxy heavy on his shoulders. "The heart demands sacrifice, and every choice we make fractures what little remains of our souls." A silence fell between them, the kind that only comes before the most terrible decisions. An explosion rocked the station, shaking the fragile alliance to its core. The Black Host's vanguard breached the outer defenses, spilling into the corridors like a tide of shadow and fire. The battle was brutal and unrelenting. Blades clashed, guns roared, and the screams of the fallen echoed in the cold metal halls. In the heart of the chaos, Vane and Serafina fought side by side, their uneasy partnership forged by desperation and necessity. Between exchanges of fire and steel, they shared fragmented truths and whispered regrets. "I never wanted this," Vane confessed, voice strained. "The weight of immortality, the burden of the heart, it has cost me everything." Serafina's eyes softened for a moment. "Ambition is a double-edged sword. We all pay a price." As the Black Host pressed closer, Vane made his decision. He would wield the heart one last time, to save what remained, even if it meant his own undoing. With trembling hands, he activated the ancient device. The station shuddered as reality itself warped and bent to the heart's terrible will. Light tore through the darkness, ripping apart the Black Host's forces in a cataclysmic surge. But the cost was immediate and devastating. Vane felt his essence unraveling, memories flashing like broken stars. His very being stretched across the void. Serafina caught him as he faltered, their eyes locking in a moment heavy with sorrow and understanding. "Your sacrifice will be remembered," she whispered. Vane smiled faintly. "I only hope it was not in vain." The heart's power sealed the breach. The Black Host's advance halted, their warships scattered like leaves in a storm. But the victory was Pyrrhic. The station was fractured beyond repair, and Vane's physical form was gone, consumed by the weapon's terrible energy. In the silence that followed, Serafina stood alone amidst the ruins, the heart now dormant and silent. Her gaze drifted to the stars, endless, cold, and indifferent. The galaxy had been spared, but at a cost that echoed in every shadow. As dawn broke over Zephyris, a new era began, one forged in sacrifice, shadowed by betrayal, and haunted by the ghosts of those who dared to wield immortality. The last embers of Zephyris Station flickered like dying stars amid the vast darkness of space. The battered hull, scarred by war and sacrifice, drifted silently, a tomb for those who had fought and fallen beneath its shattered domes. Marek Vane was gone, his essence consumed by the heart of Asheris in that final, desperate act. Yet his name echoed in whispered legends and fractured histories, a testament to the cost of ambition and the burden of immortality. Serafina Voss stood alone on the observation deck, the heart cradled in her hands, no longer a weapon, but a weight, cold and pulsing faintly, like the fragile heartbeat of a dying star. Her eyes traced the infinite expanse beyond, where distant suns burned bright and faded into oblivion. "The galaxy is not shaped by the strong alone," she murmured, voice heavy with the knowledge of loss. "It is a canvas painted in sacrifice, betrayal, and the fleeting moments between." Around her, echoes of the past lingered. The fallen allies, the broken promises, the fractured loyalties. The immortality she once coveted now felt like a curse, a never-ending sentence of watching empires rise and crumble, of bearing the scars of every choice and betrayal. The heart was silent, its terrible power spent, yet its shadow would stretch across time like a wound that never healed. In the void beyond, stars collapsed and new ones ignited. A cosmic cycle of birth and death reflected the fate of empires and men. Seraphina placed the heart within a containment chamber, sealing it behind layers of ancient wards and forgotten rites. "No one shall wield this power again," she vowed, though the truth was less certain. Power always finds a way. She turned away from the dying station, her silhouette framed against the rising light of a distant sun. The cost had been unimaginable, the death of heroes, the fall of worlds, the corruption of souls. Yet within the ashes lay a fragile hope that from endings come beginnings, and from sacrifice, redemption. The galaxy would remember the day Cadia fell, but it would also remember those who fought in its shadow, those who bore the weight of impossible choices and lived, if only to witness the slow burn of a new era. Seraphina's final thought as she entered the cold void beyond Zephyrus was a question, whispered not to the stars, but to herself. What price are we truly willing to pay for immortality? The dying suns flickered once more, their light fading into the infinite dark, an eternal reminder that every empire, every hero, must one day fall. The end.